Welcome to She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting. We're your hosts, Nancy McClelland
and Questian Telka.
And every episode, we're digging into the real experiences, challenges, and unspoken truths of life in this profession.
Because if you've ever felt like you're the only one, you're not. And you shouldn't have to figure it out alone.
Special thanks to our Season 2 sponsors, Forwardly, Relay, and Client Hub. We're so grateful to them for helping us bring these conversations to life, enabling us to share out loud what everyone's thinking, but no one's saying. Learn more about them on our sponsors page at shecounts.show.
Today's episode is called Start with No. And we have a special guest with us, Brandy Jordan, a self-proclaimed Jane of all trades. We're going to talk about challenging our default inclination to say yes and explore the power of starting with no instead.
Brandy has made a name for herself in our world with her role as Catalyst with Woodard, Concept Alchemist at High Rock Accounting, and before that, Creative Badass for the Zero Partner Relations team. She loves pushing creative boundaries for herself and those around her, and is going to help us do a little bit of that today. Welcome to She Counts, Brandy.
Thank you. I feel like I should have worn a glitter cape or something, or had a confetti cannon with that intro. I'm excited to be here with you both, so this will be fun.
Well, as you and probably our listeners know, we love launching every episode with a story. And Nancy, this is a really special one because it was the genesis behind the whole concept of the She Counts podcast in the first place.
It's true. It's true. Years ago, I sent a text to Questian about what life would look like if our default weren't saying yes. She and I, we love saying yes to everything. As a matter of fact, we'll get ourselves into a lot of trouble with how much we say yes. And so I was like, what if our default weren't saying yes? It weren't a reactive no, but rather a default proactive no. And then we'd have to convince ourselves of the reasons to say yes instead of the other way around. And she was like, we should start a podcast about that. And for a time, this seems ridiculous in retrospect, but for a time, our plan was to have a podcast entirely dedicated to ways we could do this and what kind of impact it might have in the lives of women, especially. And eventually we realized it was too specific. We had way more ideas that we wanted to explore. And the title, it was sort of negative sounding, Start with No. You know, before you get into that underlying concept and understand what it's about, it can start off feeling like a negative thing to say. But honestly, I'm not sure this podcast would ever have materialized if it hadn't been for that text conversation. And then I saw this great article by Brandy in the Woodard Report called The Power of Saying No to Boost Productivity and Set Boundaries. And I knew I wanted her as the guest for this topic.
That's right. Yeah. So why don't we start there? Brandy, tell us about where did your motivation come from behind writing this article?
Well, the article was actually born from a pattern I kept bumping into previously when I was coaching a lot of high-performing professionals. I mean, these are bright, capable people driving themselves into the ground because word no felt like career limiting or a personal flaw. And every time they were declining a request, that guilt showed up and like whispering to them, you're letting everyone down. And honestly, I've even been there myself, taking on endless commitments, because saying no felt like I wasn't up to the challenge. I didn't have guilt. I just have to be superwoman, so let me do everything. And then recently, I noticed this issue resurfacing in other colleagues. They were struggling with saying no, even when it's completely justified or necessary. And it just made me realize how important it is to reinforce the idea that saying no isn't a negative. It's essential to managing your energy and your priorities effectively. Because when I shifted my mindset and began seeing no as a filter rather than that failure, it completely changed the game. Because that perspective, helped me realize that setting the boundaries is not about being rigid or closed off. It's about self-respect and discernment and intentionally protecting your time and energy so that you can say yes wholeheartedly to the things that truly align with both your values and goals.
I literally have goosebumps right now. I want to make sure you know that, like, we could just, in my opinion, we could end the podcast right there and be like, well, that was pretty much it. Like, nail on the head. Yes.
I
Sorry,
think one of the
Questian.
things that's okay. One of the things that comes up for me when I think about that, and about why I don't initially say no and I have a tendency to say yes, is especially in the earlier years of business or earlier years of career growth, when you start to see that opportunities are coming your way. For myself, it created this feeling like, if I don't say yes to this and take this opportunity, I'll never have this opportunity again. So a bit of a scarcity mindset, or people will stop asking me because I'm telling them no. And so then I felt compelled to always say yes to everything. And what that has created over time is definitely this sense of overwhelm, because you're saying yes to everything all of the time. And so trying to shift that mindset and saying, okay, like, I really need to pick and choose these opportunities so that I can bring my best to all of those opportunities. So that's what I try to do now, but I'm still not perfect at it.
You're not only still not perfect at it, you literally texted me last week saying, hey, that opportunity, that speaking opportunity that you offered to a friend of ours who turned it down, how about me? Can I do that? And I was like, no, Question. You like, not only were you not saying no, you're reaching out to me to say I want to do the thing. And I was like, no, I'm going to protect you from yourself here. So yeah, we're, as Question likes to say, nobody should talk to us about this topic except for somebody like Brandy, who seems like you got it. I don't know. Do you have it figured out? I mean, what does it mean to start with no? And how is that different from just learning to say no?
Oh, I do not have it all figured out. I mean, we're not perfect. I mean, come on, you've seen me working. But
it's true. It was a bit of a trick question.
It is. It is. But it doesn't mean it's not a consistent work in progress that can't get better, because, again, reinforcing and starting with no is not about being negative or difficult. It is about installing basically a new operating system for your decisions. So most of us, especially high achievers, because we have to do everything, we're taught to keep yes ready on our lips because it feels collaborative, it feels valuable or heroic, right? But the hidden danger is that this reflex leaves us reactive. So we're forever rearranging time and energy after we've already committed something. And when you flip the default to no, that turns that reflex on its head. So instead of a mere refusal tactic, right, it becomes a strategic framework that lets you assess every request on alignment, opportunity cost, the real ROI before you grant a deliberate, high impact yes. You know, I read way too much, but I read about this.
What do you mean you read too
I read
much? I don't know. I
most
never
random
feel like
things.
I read enough. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
same.
I read about a decision-making operating system in Daniel Kahneman's. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he wrote about a reflexive, hardwired yes belongs to what he calls System 1, which is a quick, emotional, people-pleasing response. Starting with no would force what he calls a System 2 pause, where you think, can I really afford the cognitive load, the hours, the context switching that this demands? And so when you treat every new opportunity neutrally, free of that immediate social pressure, you give yourself the space to weigh it against your existing goals, values, and commitments. That neutral default then acts as even a decision fatigue buffer, preserving that mental bandwidth for genuinely strategic choices instead of just burning energy on those knee-jerk commitments. So I think another way that you can visualize this is think about budgeting your money. If you're constantly spend first and figure it out later, you will always feel behind and stretched. But if you start each month at zero and consciously decide exactly how you're going to allocate your funds, you're going to feel empowered and in control. So that same applies to your time and energy. It moves you from being reactive and overwhelmed to being strategic and empowered and
But
ultimately
it
more impactful.
sounds like a lot of work, Brandy.
It's not a lot of work because you already know, or you should know, especially as professionals, we have our goals, we have our vision. It's about keeping that forefront. That should not be a consistent work. And it's going to feel like at the start because anything new is work. But it becomes a habit to think, well, this doesn't really align with what I want to do. So, no. Or this actually fulfills a lot of things I'm trying to do. So, yes.
Yeah, I think I can't, in terms of the workload, right? Yes, it's a lot of work to change it and to do it, but it's also a lot of work to feel like you're constantly behind. Like I was thinking about it when we were getting ready for the podcast about when was the last time that I remember being like, wow, all of my work is done. I'm caught up. I think I'm going to stop working and go like do something fun, right? Or I'm just going to
I
take a
was,
day off because I'm
yeah,
finished with everything.
19
I,
years ago. I actually remember that day. I was sitting, I think back to that. I'm not even joking. I think back to that day sometimes when I'm frantic all the time. And I say, I know I wasn't always like this. I remember that day when I was 34 years old and I was sitting on my front porch and I was like, huh, I have choices. I could go to the beach today. I could read a book. I could do yoga. What am I going to do? And I feel like I've spent the past 19 years trying to get back to that moment.
yeah, same. I mean, I feel the same way when I took a weekend off recently. Actually, it wasn't even the whole weekend. I don't remember the last time I've taken an actual full weekend off, but I was like, I'm going to take my kids to the pool. I wanted, this is a sad admission, right? It's like, I'm going to take my kids to the pool and I'm going to take the day off. And I remember being at the pool with them and being like, wow, this is a nice feeling. Like I'm not actually working. So yeah, I think it would be nice I would love to get back to that point and learning to be able to choose intentionally, like Brandy said, make sure that I'm choosing things that are in alignment with where I'm going, what I want to be doing, and being very intentional about it, because I do, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. I have that immediate like stage 1 emotional reaction that's like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I want to do it." Yes. And then it's like, "Oh, I'm committing to something that's 3 months from now, so it's fine. Like I'll be able to do that 3 months from now.
I'll be all caught up in 3
I'll be all
months.
caught
I've said
up."
this
No,
Yeah.
to this myself a million times. I think there's that meme out there that's like being an adult is saying, I'll catch up next week, every week for the rest of your life.
because every time you say yes, though, you're saying no to something else without whether you mean to or not.
Yeah. So, Brandy, what changed for you when you stopped seeing no as this either failure or guilt laden thing or a, a missing an opportunity? When you started, you said earlier seeing it as a filter. What changed for you when you started doing this?
Um, it's hard. I mean, I still have my moments, like I said, because it's hard to overcome an entire life of like where you equate no with failure, anyways, or that for me, I'm not. If I say no, it means I'm not competent or capable enough to handle everything coming my way. So I felt like I was disappointing people, or I was going to miss out on some opportunity. FOMO over nothing. It's that internal story, right? That held a lot of emotional weight too. And we've already talked about we all have that feeling. But that turning point when I reframed it to that strategic filter rather than just judging my abilities, each no wasn't about rejecting opportunities anymore. It was about protecting and prioritizing my core responsibilities, my goals, my personal well being, because I was putting all that to the back burner. By saying no more intentionally, I noticed even my productivity improved, my energy improves, my attitude, because we all know I have one. That also improved. This is a
It's
better version.
true. It's so true. It's one of the
I
things
know.
I love the most about you. I I loved you from the first moment that we met online, honestly, Brandy. That tude comes through and I
It's
appreciate it.
there.
Keep it bright, keep it
It's
shining.
there. So, but instead of feeling guilty, right, or being stretched thin, I'm I feel clearer and more purposeful and less anxious, because I also carry that with me too, all that anxiety over it. But over time, this approach has transformed how I make decisions across many aspects of my life. It's not just professionally, this is personally as well, because it goes hand in hand.
So, can you tell me or tell us, why do you think women in accounting default to yes? And then what is the cost of doing so, of that
Aside from our
reflex?
sanity. Aside from our
Aside from
sanity.
sanity.
Okay, I guess we got the sanity part figured out.
Yeah.
Apology,
We'll
but
put that one to the
I mean,
side.
I am confused by the why
Yeah.
behind it.
Well, women in professional services, especially in accounting, they tend to operate under immense pressure, because they want to prove their worth, their capability, their reliability. And the cultures in the industry typically reward that responsiveness, that availability, that service-oriented mindsets, which is all very good things in moderation. It's harmful when we take it to that extreme.
Do you see
So
that a lot? Like, have you kind of seen this repeatedly and a lot through your experience coaching?
yes, through coaching, through the different industries I've been in, it's across the board. I feel like this isn't just a professional services thing or an accounting industry thing. This is a woman in the workplace thing. And that expectation there, it impacts women because we, whether we like it or not, are often conditioned socially to be agreeable and accommodating and nurturing. And many women I've coached, or even just in conversations, have shared experiences of fearing being labeled as difficult or uncommitted or inflexible if they ever push back, like on those workloads or expectations. And as a result, that saying yes becomes a default, right? Just out of that fear or habit or conditioning, whatever it is, rather than just a conscious choice.
Yeah, and we often default in certain roles, which we've talked about on the podcast before, like being the note taker in a board meeting, or being the person who goes to the store and purchases a card for everyone to sign on a birthday. Or so there's always there are smaller things that we're constantly saying yes to as well. And it kind of, I think, helps create those patterns of continually just taking on all of the extra things that need to be done on top of saying yes to bigger projects as well.
And then you're constantly in a state of feeling like you have to catch up, because none of those little extra housework type tasks, I don't know if that's going to be a PC approved thing to say, but those type of tasks that don't necessarily equate to a bottom line or income generating, any of that, you still have all the other work that you need to do. And somebody else who isn't concerned in saying yes to all the extra stuff is getting their stuff done. So you're in that constant state.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, how would I feel like I want to do a group exercise, even though we can't because all of our listeners are sort of invisible to us here. But you were talking about how having clear priorities could actually help us develop this confidence to say no. If I just made a list of my top priorities right now, and then, I mean, what are we talking about? 3 priorities, 5 priorities, 10 priorities? What kind of clarity do we need in order to get to the point where this is going to start kicking in the sense that we can look at this list and say, does it align? Does it not align? Because I want that confidence to say no, but I hate the idea of disappointing people, and I hate the idea of missing opportunities. I mean, I live my life.
So do
FOMO is so real. Yeah. So what's my next step? How do I define these priorities?
There's a couple of different ways for me personally. I, a couple of years back, finally, even though I coached people to do this, I never did it. Sorry.
The truth comes out, Brandy.
But I finally did it, and it's been life-changing for me, and a whole nother thing that could be a whole nother podcast. But I ended up writing out my own personal values, and my personal values align with everything that I do. And I have 5 personal values. So even when I take a job, does that job align with my personal values? And then you can get more granular than that. Whereas if this is work decisions, what is your company goals? What is your job and your career goals? What are the top I would say maybe 3 or 4 things that you want with your career, and does this align with that? Does this align with your firm values, or those type of things to help guide you for what you're trying to do? But mine always started personally with my personal values, and then everything else has aligned to that. And so
Yeah, that
then at
kind of
work, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say that kind of goes in line with what I always say and what I always tell Nancy is like always going back to your why, like trying to
Mhm.
remember your why. I mean, that's just one question, but that's what I always try to do. And sometimes it's effective and sometimes not, if I'm being honest.
Don't
Yeah.
overwhelm yourself though with like 10 priorities. Like,
Yeah.
be so what is going to have the biggest impact for what your ultimate goal is, and make that your priority. And does this align with that, right?
Well, then what do you do? Okay, so now I've got my list. I've got my list. Let's pretend, because I don't. But let's pretend that I just made a list of 5 personal values, which kind of equates to questions why. And then I've actually am refining that list, and I'm saying, okay, in keeping with these 5 personal values, I have 3 career goals, right? And so now everything that comes my way, I'm comparing it, and I go, oh, look, this isn't actually in alignment, but I really love this person, or it's a really good cause, or whatever. What advice would you give to me now that I'm afraid that starting from no is going to make me look selfish or inflexible or not a team player? Now, what do I do? Like, okay, great. I've got my list and I've decided I'm starting with no. I'm trying to convince myself, yes. I don't get there because it's not in alignment. Now I'm a jerk, though, right?
Well,
Am I a jerk?
I mean, no, I'm
No.
kidding.
I told you
No.
about Brandy's attitude. That was a long
No.
pause, Brandy.
Well, I mean, the first part in this entire shift is to shift your narrative about it and stop thinking that saying no is inherently selfish or inflexible, because it's self aware and intentional. Because by thoughtfully evaluating your commitments, you're respecting not only your own capacity, but then your team's capacity or someone else's capacity and ability to rely on you fully when you do commit. So it's not about fear of missing out. It's making sure that when you say yes, it's going to be yes, I'm in and I'm all in 100%, because it's a demonstration of your integrity and reliability. It's not selfishness, you know? So I would seriously say, now that you have your priorities and your list, you should sit there and take a look at it and be like, I really like this. Do I even have the capacity? And you have to give that honest look, because if this is going to be an emotional decision, you still need to bring some logic into it. Could you actually do it without compromising your other priorities?
Ooh, can I do this without compromising my other I'm writing that down.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great one. So, would you say I mean, I think so, but I would frame and say that saying no is actually a leadership skill, not only for yourself but for your team as you were commenting, because when you start saying no, you give flexibility to your team to be able to focus in other areas as well.
Yeah. Because if leaders can protect their own bandwidth, then they're modeling that strategic restraint. They're demonstrating that focus is a competitive advantage. And it signals to the team that thoughtful prioritization is how you deliver excellence, not the endless accommodation to everything.
Wow. This is so full of gems for me. Thoughtful prioritization is how you deliver that excellence. That is amazing. I think I'm already figuring out where a lot of my holes are, and one of them is that I have way too many priorities. So
Me
it's
too.
time for, yeah, time
Yeah,
for
I
me to
started
narrow these down.
I'm like, my problem is that some of my priorities are things that maybe are not business growth priorities, but they're I want to do them because I like to priorities. And so, it's hard to narrow them down and to make it just like a smaller number, even though it's like, okay, I know, like Nancy said, it's like, you don't have time to do that. And it's like, but I want to do that
I want
really
to.
bad. Yeah.
And
And
I'm
Um,
that's
pretty sure that I'm Superwoman. So
no, I'm
I'll
definitely not.
future Nancy will figure this out. She always
Yeah.
does, and she always
right.
has, but she's going to burn out if she keeps doing this, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like current Nancy needs to help future Nancy out.
That's right.
And current Nancy can also help future Questian out and vice versa. So,
Yeah.
That's right.
So
do you have some like what are some practical how-tos for saying no?
Well, first, don't start saying no to the biggest thing that comes your way. Start small because you have to get comfortable with saying no.
That's smart.
Practice that using clear yet empathetic language. For example, when the client request, acknowledge it positively but firmly set your boundary. Thank you for considering me, but I cannot take this on right now. You can offer alternative solutions if it's possible for that. Like you mentioned earlier, like suggesting another colleague who could benefit from the opportunity or might be better aligned for it. Especially since you two work in tandem, you'll know each other's goals and priorities. That's a perfect setup there too.
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Another thing is,
I just want to pause there for a second to say, I mentioned her on one of the other recordings that we did. Claire Karchmar was the chief operations officer at my first really big client. And one of the most important things that I learned about being a professional was from her. She said, come to me with solutions, not with problems. Because I would come to her and I would say, look at what a disaster the accounting department is. There's this problem and this problem and this problem. And she was like, and what is your proposal? And I feel like that lines up with what you're saying here, is that you're bringing the alternative solutions with you to the no. You're saying, no, I can't help with this, but I know someone else who might be a great fit, or this doesn't align, this isn't in alignment with our ideal client profile or our niche or whatever. However, I have a network of colleagues that are trusted. Of course, building that network can be challenging, and whether or not you're charging referral fees, and there's a lot of complexity there, but you can have an alternative when you say no, and then you don't have to feel like a jerk.
Yes. And another tip is to give yourself time, to avoid that knee jerk yes. Pause before you respond.
That's a big problem for me. Like
Reduce
I just
that
am like
impulse.
immediate. Yeah. I know I need to just take a step back and pause and say, okay, and then convince myself, right? Like, because it's easy for me to say yes. It's hard for me to sit down and analyze it, as you're saying, and then go, okay, like I need to convince myself that this should be a yes instead of a no. And that pause is probably my biggest issue, is if I could take a step back and do that, and I take time to think about it. Because when Nancy brought up this story that she was talking about earlier, I was like, I saw it and I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that so bad. Immediately was just like, this is aligns. It does align with all of with my values, with my goals. But in terms of the amount of time that I have at the moment, it makes no sense. And so she said that to me, and I had to I sat on it for a minute, because it was immediately my initial reaction was like, no, but I want to do it. And so then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, I really should not take that on right now, even though it's something I very much want to do.
Not only does taking that pause reduce that impulse, right, to give you that time to think, it's an easy response to give to someone about, let me review my workload, I'll get back to you tomorrow. It gives you that space to thoughtfully assess the request without the stress of an immediate reaction. And then you'll notice, too, by taking that time to pause and think, your fear will often diminish as well. Your fear of saying that no, because now you've thought it through logically, and you can come back and say, this is not going to be for me at this time.
Yes, because I think that's a good point that she just made, like your fear of saying no. Because what goes through my head, back to that, will the opportunities still be there, is the fear of, like, if I don't capitalize on it and try to take this opportunity now, like I won't get that again. And so there's part of the fear of like telling somebody no, because I don't like to disappoint people, and I'm a people pleaser. And then there's the other part of it, which is the fear of saying no, and like that opportunity won't happen again. And if it's something really important to me, that's when it becomes very difficult.
And when you put that value to your boundaries, it's also other people start to appreciate your thoughtfulness, that you took the time to consider it. So you're not letting anyone down.
Yeah.
There's so many practical implications there. Like you just covered decision making, um, acknowledgement, delegation, time management, energy management, which is something that Lynette Osconnell, when she talks about burnout, talks about doing both time and energy audits, not just the time that something takes you. So I mean, like, yeah, I'm on board. I know that I get that this concept of starting with no could really change my life. I want to know if you could share a time when starting from no led you to make a much better decision, like the actual frontal cortex executive decision making. The emotion fell away, the emotion both in the reaction to saying no, like the fear you were just saying can subside, but also the emotion behind having wanted to do it in the first place, but having to decide that no, it didn't align. What's an example where starting from no led you to make a much better decision than you would have from autopilot? Yes.
So I know we've been talking mainly like, saying no at work or in other personal life, whatever the case may be. But my toughest no wasn't aimed at a boss or a colleague. It was aimed squarely at myself and
Oh,
telling
wow.
myself no.
That's hard.
It was. But for years, vacations were just new scenery with the same inbox for me. I would work
Oh.
while on vacation. No one demanded that I stay online. I mean, there wasn't any of that. It was just my own inner superhero insisting, check on that, it's fine. Or, go do this, it'll fine. This will only take a few minutes, right? And the irony, and why I took a minute for saying this situation, is the irony was painful because I was preaching boundaries to everyone else while burning mine to the ground.
Wow.
So
I
there
love
was,
that.
Wow.
The a change in scenery with the same inbox. Is that how you said it? I was like,
Yep.
oh my gosh.
Yep.
That sounds familiar.
So there was one point, and I don't even remember which exact trip it was or anything, but I finally drew the line. The laptop stayed home because I knew if it was in my bag, I'm not going to leave it be. The notifications went off on the phone, and I told the whole team up front, I will be unreachable. Carry on. Don't break anything. But the hardest part in doing this was silencing that nagging voice that something might implode, right? And it never does. There's nothing life-threatening that happens in our particular line of work that would need anything right away. And if something did break, I can fix it when I get back, right? And the payoff in doing this one little thing was almost immediate. I mean, it was a real rest and break for a change. My brain could turn off of all of that I was doing there. I came back with a fresh perspective, because that's a great thing when you walk away from stuff and then come back and look at it again. New things happen, and into to that hypocritical guilt of I'm telling everybody else to do this, but don't mind me. It's good for you, not for me.
Hypocrisy is a very,
Exactly.
very painful emotion. It
is.
really is. It absolutely is. And everything that you're saying is resonating to the extent, and you may not even know this, but the reason that we're recording on a Tuesday instead of a Friday is that I am going on my first vacation without a laptop since pre-pandemic. I am leaving this Thursday. I will be gone for almost 2 weeks. I the actual trip is only 10 days, but I built in a day beforehand and a couple days afterwards so that I can actually be in a situation where I'm refreshed before I go back into the office. And I'm not bringing my laptop. I'm not bringing my laptop. And you know what I said to myself? I actually didn't just say it to myself. I said it in my mastermind group last night. I said, if this all burns down while I'm gone, then that wasn't the business that I wanted to be running anyway.
And it won't. It will not burn
Well,
down while you're gone.
It won't.
No.
It'll be fine.
It'll be
And that's
fine.
one line I've held ever since. Even now, everybody at work knows if I'm on vacation time, you're not touching me. Bye. See you when I get back.
And what do you do about that stress, though? Yeah, with you know your inbox is going to be overflowing when you come back. How does that not make you stressed? Because that makes me really anxious.
No, because I've just learned I have my own system when I get back. I keep my calendar open, not free of meetings, so that I can focus. All right, I'm going to clear out this. Like I have my little list of things I need to do when I get back. And I also have like a white space where as I'm going through, I make notes of remember to check this, check this, check this. Then I get that done. And then now I go through my list of what I need to do. And I already have that in place.
I have found that when I take a vacation and I really put everything away and I decompress and I don't think about work, when I come back, I am so much more efficient. My efficiency level increases substantially if I am able to take time away and let my brain rest. I don't do it enough, but there is a noticeable shift in how quickly I'm able to work, how focused I am when I'm getting burnt out versus when I have just come back from having some time away. So,
And it's good for other people on the team too, because magically it's amazing what they can figure out when you're not around.
right? Yeah, like suddenly they become highly
Yeah,
self-sufficient.
exactly. All of a sudden, like the emails in the beginning are no longer relevant because they've already solved for it. And you're like, great, next.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, there was something that you wrote in your article that I mean, there was the whole article was so good. I'm going to make sure it's in the show notes for our readers. I mean, for our listeners to
Absolutely.
read. There were a couple of things that you talked about in there. One of them in particular that was sort of new to me was you call it the planning fallacy, and I want you to share more about that with us and with our listeners.
That's from that constant reading I do. Um, it's actually funny because it was also mentioned in the book I mentioned earlier, but there was it's
I'll make
a
sure to put that in the show notes as well. That's
yeah,
thinking fast and slow.
yeah. Um, the planning fallacy is a concept from behavioral economics. And that started with the psychologist who wrote that other the book, Daniel Kahneman, and then his partner, Amos Tversky. And in essence, it describes our passive tendency to underestimate how long tasks or projects actually take. So
Mm.
even when past experiences have shown us otherwise, because we often believe we can accomplish more in less time, discounting any unforeseen complications or disruptions. And
Guilty.
you're right. I do it too. Uh,
There's a concept in software development. My husband, Mark, is a software developer. And in extreme programming, they have something called velocity, where you determine how long ideally something would take, and then you look at reality and you say, oh, I'm going to assign a velocity of this. So a velocity of 1 would mean that in real life it takes exactly as long as you ideally imagined it would take. So a velocity of 1.5 means it's going to take 50% longer than you think it should take. A velocity of 2 means it'll take twice as long, et cetera, and so on. And you assign that velocity to every single project. And so you try to kind of imagine how much longer than ideally each project would take. And I have sort of dreamed about implementing this in my world of accounting, but I never have. It sounds like that has a lot to do with this planning fallacy.
I bet because it's a planning fallacy that the difference is we know it's going to take longer, but yet we still think we can get it done faster. And
Right.
that's the fallacy in it.
Yeah, I feel like I know that. I recognize that it takes me about twice as long as I think something's going to take me, but I still don't want to acknowledge it because it's like, well, I need to get it done by this amount of time.
Right?
Right.
So I'm going to pretend like I can do that and
Of course.
try, but it never happens. And it's generally probably twice as long as I think.
Right. Because when we're talking about saying no, if you underestimate the true cost, and it's not just time, it's also your mental energy and resources, and you add that up of every commitment, you're constantly overspending your available bandwidth. You
That's
know?
so true. I mean, that's part of it is I schedule those times. And when I'm thinking about those times, time blindness is also an issue for people with ADHD. But I also don't think about, okay, well, I have been working for how many hours and what mental capacity are those tasks taking me? Because some are more mentally taxing than others, right? They require more deep thought. Where am I going to be at mentally when I need to do the next things that I have on my schedule? And so it's like I'm thinking about it from a time perspective, but not about taking a breaks and mental energy and things like that. And so those are really important things to be considering when you're trying to figure out how much time you have for something. So I need to take your advice, my own advice, and do a better job of that.
Yeah.
Well, and there's something that goes along with that, which, I feel like, Brandy, this is very much in alignment with like this overarching, what are you trying to teach us here? What should our takeaways being? It's not just about saying no more. It's about focusing on saying yes better.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. It's thinking it all through and making sure that your yes is impactful and it means something. And that's where your energy deserves to be, is that using your time as currency. So that I've talked about in the past, that if you think about what it truly costs through all of that with your strategic thinking, or it's going to cost less presence for your family or fewer opportunities to recharge, that saying no becomes that conscious decision, and start asking, can I truly afford to say yes to this? What else am I implicitly saying no to when I accept? And you start viewing these commitments through that lens, and you gain that clarity, you reduce the overwhelm, you preserve the integrity and quality of your work, and that yes means more.
And that's why we have to start with no, because otherwise we're not giving ourselves the time. I mean, everything that you just said, like none of that is lizard brain. That's not it's executive function. It's frontal cortex, right? It's my logical cognitive brain that needs an opportunity to think through everything that you just said. And if I'm saying yes is my default, then I'm not even giving myself the opportunity to do any of that.
Yeah.
I need to text Questian and be like, Questian, I got to talk this through with you because I have this opportunity, but I can't do that every second of every day. So I have to learn. I really do believe I have to learn to start with no and then work through
backward.
give. Yes, exactly. Exactly. There's that great meme that on Instagram I've seen so many times. Don't be present for others if it means being absent for yourself. Right? That's exactly what we're talking about here,
Yeah,
because
because self-abandonment is unsustainable leadership.
there's
So
another quote.
I know. You're
Self-abandonment is unsustainable leadership.
yeah.
Wow.
So there's a very important piece of this puzzle, right? Is being sure to train or teach others to respect your boundary, respect the fact that you've told them no. So how can leaders encourage a start with no mindset on their teams without shutting down collaboration and opportunities?
Modeling is going to be essential, honestly. I mean, if you, as a leader, consistently practice clear and respectful boundary setting, showing your team what a thoughtful evaluation looks like, it normalizes the behavior for everyone else. It's crucial to frame this mindset positively rather than negatively, though, because this is not about shutting down ideas or creating barriers. It is about making these conscious, strategic decisions. Because it means creating a culture where people feel safe having those open and honest discussions about their capacity and their workloads and their true bandwidth. So you're going to have to regularly check in with team members, not just on projects or deadlines, but generally on how they're managing their commitments and stress levels. You want to encourage them to practice that no first, thinking in small ways to start with, like I said earlier, like maybe they can assess their minor tasks before agreeing, and then they gradually build that confidence to apply the same approach to bigger decisions. And it helps the team view saying no not as that resistance, but as a valuable tool for strategic focus. And when you are, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, right. So it starts with your team having clarity, building clarity, and not guilt over saying no, right? So it forces us to focus forward, focus toward your core priorities in order to align with those values that you were talking about and what your priorities and your goals are.
And modeling, like you can't just tell them to do this if you're not doing it
Doing
too.
it yourself. Yeah.
Mhm. You
And
have
I think
to,
that's
one
so
thing that
important.
I have been able to do in this past year has been a big goal of mine is to shift the tone of my conversations with my team to say, I need you to help me. I'm not good at this, and I need you to help me get there. And so, for example, with my EA, Allie, I was like, I will give you a raise if you can help me survive through the end of July. Like, I just need to make it through the end of July. And that means I can't drop any really, really, really big plates. And I need your help because I can't do this alone. So it's not just about, I normally think of myself as being the support for my team and asking them for their help and having them protect me from myself and help me get through all the things that I overcommitted to. That was a very that took a lot of vulnerability, and it was a little embarrassing, but it's been really amazing. Like
Mhm.
they've really been stepping up for me, and I really appreciate it.
yeah.
But that's a
I
hard
mean,
conversation to have. Like that
it
takes
is.
vulnerable and empathetic leadership in order to have that conversation in the first place, because we like to think that our team members think that we're invincible, but they know we're not.
Of
They know
course.
we're
They
not.
know we're
Come
not.
on,
Yeah, it's just like with your children and parenting. I'm like I do my best to let my kids see like I do not know everything. You think I do now because you're young and small, but when you're older, you're going to be like she has no idea what she's talking
Yeah,
about.
none of us do. It was all a lie when you were a kid. None of us know what's happening.
That's
No,
right.
not the rule book about becoming an adult. Really?
Yeah.
I thought that was just me.
Nope, not just you.
Nope. But having that conversation with your team, though, it's not only building that trust, but it's openly getting everyone involved in respecting and honoring a boundary, which is what you want your team to do anyways. When they have that safe place, to decline requests without the judgment, the trust grows and your collaboration deepens. So you setting that example opens up the door for others on your team to do the same. And then everyone starts to understand each other's limits and strengths pretty clearly. It leads to a
What do
healthy
you do
dynamic.
when one person's maybe taking advantage of that, or one person, not that they would be consciously taking advantage of it necessarily, but one person's concept about how much could be accomplished in a given hour is very different than someone else's. And I feel like we might accidentally be giving permission for folks to underperform, whereas the people who are overachievers, they're going to keep overachieving because it's what they do.
I think that becomes a coaching opportunity where you're going to have to work one-on-one with them and really understand how they're spending their time and help them understand what the capacity should look like, right? That's
Yeah.
part of it too, understanding
Which
that
goes back
balance.
to we as leaders, we need to be having the conversation about capacity and mental and physical well-being in the first place. And those
Yes.
conversations often, those topics don't make it into conversation in the first place. Yeah.
So this has been an amazing conversation. I feel like we've learned so much here today already. And as we wrap up, we want to ask listeners to follow our She Counts podcast LinkedIn page and to join in on the conversation by sharing under the episode, Start with No. Will you commit to trying this approach once in the next couple of weeks and let us know how it feels? I will do it.
Yeah. Will you?
I sort of did it already, but I guess that doesn't
What, the
count. I have
one
to do it
time?
again. The
Wow.
one time, right?
Yeah, I don't
You got to do it more than
I
once.
think you
You
may
got to
have
practice.
missed the point of the episode.
Yes, I'll do it.
We're supposed to be building a muscle of discernment.
That's
One
right.
time isn't enough.
Yep, that's right.
Oh my
I will
gosh.
do it more than once, and I will share
Yes.
it.
All right.
I'm
Okay.
gonna put
Well,
a post-it note on my on my computer that just says no.
It says start with no.
Yeah.
Well, I will commit to doing it if you commit to doing it.
Definitely.
Ooh, accountability partners.
Yeah.
That's right. We're
Did you
pretty
see
good at
that?
that. Yeah, we're pretty good at that.
Well, before we sign off, I want to leave you with a quote by perhaps the most famous poet on Instagram, Nayira Wahid. I don't say yes because I'm strong. I say no because I am.
Ooh, that's a good one. I love that. Thanks for being here with us on She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting.
If something in today's episode hit home for you, well, that's exactly why we're doing this.
So you feel seen, heard, and never alone.
Remember that you can get CPE credit for listening at earmark.app. Links to that and any other resource will be in the show notes.
And please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review because that helps other people find the podcast. Share this with another woman in accounting who needs to hear it too.
Many thanks again to our amazing guest, Brandy Jordan. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we could have this conversation.
This was a great one, and there's lots of tidbits for me. I mean, Nancy and I have been talking about this for a long time, but now we are actually going to do it in practice for real. So,
And I've got a full
so
page of notes that I took, not for the show notes, but for myself.
for yourself.
Now you got to make those action items. They don't just
That's
sit
right.
on the paper.
Oh,
right.
Brandy, you sound like a coach.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see everyone in 2 weeks.